Are you going ahead and suing the BBC?
Yes, I have to. You know why? Because they defrauded the public, and they've admitted it. And their top echelon,
Director General and the CEO,
this is within one of our great allies. You know, they actually changed my January 6th speech, which was a beautiful speech, which was a very calming speech, and they made it sound radical. And they actually changed it. What they did was rather incredible. They're showing me the results later on, the results of what they did, how they butchered it up. But it was very dishonest, and the head man quit, and a lot of the other people
We're actually going to...
There is no doubt that Donald Trump tried to affect the outcome of the 2020 presidential election. The argument about these two clips that Panorama put together, it was stupid, it was dumb, it was moronic, it was idiotic, they shouldn't have done it. But the fact of the matter is Donald Trump did try to, you know, get people to fight, and a lot of people who turned up in court said they were doing it because Donald Trump wanted them to.
That is one reason why I've had a couple of media lawyers this morning saying, actually, the BBC should fight this in court and could have the not the defence of the edit. The edit requires an apology directly to him, without a doubt, but have the defence that actually it's broadly true that he rabble-roused.
Yes,
so
and
truth is an absolute defence.
Exactly. I don't want to get into the American legal system, but because of the First Amendment in the United States of America...
Speech is much freer.
Speech is much freer, and it is much, much harder to take a libel action against somebody than it is in the UK. In the UK, all you need to do is prove that something is untrue, and then you have won. If in the States you have to prove that it was malicious falsehood as well, i.e. you said something that was untrue, you knew to be untrue, and you said it maliciously. And so the bar is much, much higher to bring a prosecution. So, yes, the BBC should find a backbone, should fight, but the BBC right now is in turmoil.
Are you going ahead and suing the BBC?
Well, I guess I have to. You know, why not? Because they defrauded the public, and they've admitted it, and their top echelon...
Director General and the CEO
This is within one of our great allies, you know. They actually changed my January 6th speech, which was a beautiful speech, which was a very calming speech, and they made it sound radical. And they actually changed it. What they did was rather incredible. They're showing me the results later on, the results of what they did, how they butchered it up. But it was very dishonest, and the head man quit, and a lot of the other people
We're actually going to... But tonight you are saying to our viewers that you will go forward and file a defamation lawsuit against the BBC.
Well, I think I have an obligation to do it, because you can't get people, you can't allow people to do that.
Well, it's all been the most unholy mess over the last few days. The BBC, two major resignations, a huge debate about its future, including the licence fee. And by the way, these people haven't gone because of Donald Trump. Donald Trump is the final straw that's done it. I think there are many of us that feel that the Hamas statements have been taken as gospel. We've seen decades of bias on immigration, on Europe, on climate change, on net zero. Indeed, 20 years ago, the Wilson report admitted that the BBC had biases in these areas, and 20 years on, here we are. But to me, the really interesting thing is Donald Trump now threatening to sue the BBC for up to $1 billion. He's going to sue them in Florida unless by Friday he gets what he considers to be a full and frank apology. Is Trump right to sue? It's a really good debate. I have to say, I did meet Trump on Friday night and spent a few minutes with him. And his basic thought was, is this how you treat your best ally in the world? And I get it, because what Panorama did by putting together two different clips from, an hour apart in a speech was totally outrageous.
This is a really, really dangerous moment, I think, for the BBC. I've just been talking to Katie McFarlane, who was Deputy National Security Advisor to Donald Trump, very close to him. And she thought he was deadly serious about this case. He was going to prosecute it, probably in California, in Florida. he wouldn't necessarily be going for the full billion-dollar take. But this is even the legal fees here, Matt, are going to be enormous. And I think the pressure on the BBC is going to be intense. I think Trump is deadly serious about going for them. And the problem is, of course, as we both know, right at the moment, there is no real leadership to deal with this.
Andrew, we're in the middle of we're about to start a very lively debate about the future of the licence fee, charter renewal. Lisa and Andy referred to it again tonight. There are 300,000 people, apparently, who have refused to pay their licence fee. Boris Johnson now apparently being one of them, the former Prime Minister. If the BBC ends up paying Donald Trump 10 million quid, 60 million quid, whatever it is, surely that will make their case for the licence fee even more difficult, won't it?
Very, very dangerous indeed. I think we've seen lots of BBC scandals in the past, of course, but I think this is different for one very important political reason. We are now in a much more sort of tremulous political atmosphere. We have lots of different parties competing, and there is a strong chance that Reform and Nigel Farage will form the next government. Now, Nigel Farage yesterday, and I think again today, was talking about the number of people who had ceased to pay their licence fee, given what the accusations against the BBC, particularly over bias over Gaza and the rest of it. And I think it's very unlikely that a future Reform government would keep with the charter, keep with the licence fee. I think we would see the end of the BBC. I think this is an incredibly dangerous moment for the corporation.
Donald Trump's claimed that he was obliged to sue the BBC over the way one of his speeches was edited by a panorama programme. Mr. Trump told Fox News his speech had been changed to, quote, sound radical, declaring that it had defrauded the public and they admitted it. The US president has threatened a $1 billion lawsuit against the BBC. BBC lawyers say they'll respond directly in due course.
President Donald Trump has threatened to sue the BBC for $1 billion unless they apologise personally to him for misrepresenting him in 2 clips covering the January 6th riots, and they must reinstate his favourite TV presenter, Hugh Edwards. The president has announced he is suing the BBC over a panorama programme from 2024 which misrepresented the president's words by putting 2 clips next to each other, seemingly encouraging violence on January the 6th, 2021. Luckily, as these 2 quotes were so far apart in real life, nobody was inspired to storm the Capitol and try to overturn the election on that day. Trump has demanded that unless the BBC capitulate to his 4 demands, he will be suing them for $1 billion. His 4 demands include: every presenter on every BBC show across the network must apologise to him personally at the start of every show for a week. They must fly the American flag from the BBC London building permanently. They have to let Nigel Farage present Question Time until he passes away in 6 to 7 months' time. And lastly, they must bring back his favourite TV presenter, Hugh Edwards, who mysteriously disappeared from our screens with no explanation. Speaking to press that wasn't the BBC, he said, "The BBC hasn't been good television since they copied my show, The Apprentice. And they got rid of that guy. What was his name? The guy with the hair and the cigars all the time. Terrific guy. Always had time for him on the island."
This legal action that Donald Trump has threatened? Where do you want to start?
We are a long, long, long way from this being a full-on crazy media circus of a trial in, whichever part of Florida this would be.
Okay.
And the reason being is because the president's lawyers have sent a defamation letter full of fire and brimstone to the BBC chairman and the top lawyer in this organisation, it doesn't mean it's going to come to pass. I mean, the letter is actually a bit of a classic of the genre, of the defamation genre. It does all the things. It alleges really serious damage to the president caused by false, defamatory, disparaging and inflammatory statements, to use the wording there. It makes a series of demands, a retraction and an apology, and appropriate compensation to the president. It sets a deadline to comply, which is basically 10 o'clock UK time, 5 o'clock Eastern Standard Time in the US on Friday. And as with many defamation warnings, it comes with a consequence, which is if you do not comply, we'll go to court and seek $1 billion. I mean, it's just an unfathomable sum. I mean, what's that?
Yeah.
The budget of Strictly or something?
President Trump is threatening to sue the BBC for $1 billion in a legal letter from President Trump's lawyer to the BBC. The lawyer says the president wants a retraction of the documentary where they took 2 clips of him speaking and stuck them together to give a meaning that wasn't the correct meaning, and they would like compensation and an apology. The deadline for the BBC to comply with this, the lawyer says is Friday, and if President Trump doesn't get what he's asking for, then they are threatening to sue the BBC for $1 billion. And President Trump does have form. Some US broadcasters have had to pay him out some millions of pounds in compensation when he threatened to sue them. And the problem for the BBC is that if there is a payout to President Trump, and the BBC have said it wasn't right to put these two clips together, so they have admitted the mistake, but if money is paid out, it will come from license fee payers. That will be public money, and that is not a good situation for the BBC to be in. Questions are being raised about whether they should have admitted this mistake earlier and apologised. And I think there is some truth in that. BBC News sources say that the news team had a statement ready to go to apologise earlier in the week, but the BBC board didn't want that going. And the BBC chairman sort of admitted that there was a delay because they wanted to get all the facts right. But what that did is that left a vacuum. But it's not just this issue of President Trump. Some members of the board, we understand, were frustrated and annoyed that some of the issues that the BBC is accused of bias on the way it reports transgender issues, on the way it reports on Gaza and the Middle East, issues with BBC Arabic, they weren't dealt with properly. And so I think this combination of those issues, the failure to deal with the President Trump issue, is what has led to two of the BBC bosses resigning, and now this legal threat from the American president.
And hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. It has started. The White House has launched a blistering attack on the BBC. Of course, last week, information came out, a expose on the BBC's bias, showed the BBC essentially put two clips an hour apart from each other in Donald Trump's speech in 2021 together to make him look like he was inciting violence. Of course, we've seen Donald Trump Jr. come out and say about fake news and attack the BBC. But now we've got the White House coming out on behalf of Donald Trump. You won't want to miss this one. As the BBC are getting everything that they deserve right now. And I really do hope that Donald Trump goes on and sues the BBC like he did with ABC News out in the United States. BBC also, by the way, some news with regard to them. They are under a lot of pressure and are asking the sort of top people in positions at the BBC to resign. However, they haven't made an official statement with regard to any of this yet. They're ignoring it and just hoping that it goes away. But with Donald Trump involved in these things, well, it's not going to be that simple for the BBC. Guys, let's break this one down. As always, please do hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. And if you haven't already, please do follow my Instagram. It's DanPWD. So, as you can see here, ladies and gentlemen, firstly, BBC ignored second memo on Gaza war bias as director told to immediately resign. As we know, we're getting a situation here where there's a lot of MPs coming out and telling them to, of course, resign in positions of power. The only person that's really came out on side of the sort of people in the top positions is, of course, Keir Starmer. However, again, a lot of other MPs are calling for the immediate resignation of those leaders there. However, they have, of course, despite everything that's came out, they've not really issued a response. So again, they're just trying to let this go away. And that's it. So we'll see what happens with regard to that. However, as you can see, Donald Trump declares war on fake news, BBC an attack on leftist propaganda machine. The White House has accused the BBC of producing fake news amid claims the broadcaster edited a speech by US President Donald Trump. Caroline Leavitt, the US President's press secretary, said taxpayers in Britain are being forced to foot the bill for a leftist propaganda machine as she delivered her damning verdict on the BBC. Let's get into that damning verdict of the BBC now, shall we?
All right, let's get stuck in, shall we? The major breaking news emerging out of DC tonight. The White House has accused the BBC of purposeful dishonesty and 100% fake news after a Panorama documentary doctored one of President Trump's speeches.
We're going to walk down to the Capitol, and I'll be there with you, and we fight. We fight like hell. We're going to walk down to the Capitol, and we're going to cheer on our brave senators and congressmen and women.
Dear oh dear, well, Pinocchio would be proud, wouldn't he? Caroline Levitt, the President's press secretary, has hit out tonight saying British taxpayers are being, quote, forced to fund a leftist propaganda machine after it was revealed the Beeb had spliced together parts of that Trump speech to make it appear he told supporters to fight like hell before the 2021 Capitol riots. Levitt told the Daily Telegraph in an exclusive story this purposeful, dishonest, selective, edited clip by the BBC is further evidence they are total 100% fake news. Every time I travel to the UK with President Trump and I'm forced to watch the BBC, it ruins my day listening to their blatant propaganda and lies. Well, the row has now drawn in former Prime Minister Boris Johnson, who says he will stop paying the licence fee unless Director General Tim Davie resigns or explains the bias engulfing the broadcaster, quote unquote. And it follows a leaked 8,000-word letter from former BBC Standards advisor Michael Prescott, who accused executives at the Beeb of inaction over mounting evidence of bias, including one-sided Gaza coverage and censorship of the trans debate. Well,
So yeah, as we can see, it's all falling apart for the BBC at this moment in time, and credit for the White House to come out and slam. But I hope Donald Trump takes it one step further and actually goes about suing them, which I do have a feeling that he will sue them, just looking at his track record over the last couple of years. We literally seen he won $16 million against the ABC, and of course we know he hates fake news, and we've seen how he deals with BBC journalists before. Former Labour advisor Paul Richard believes the BBC does need to get its house in order, but is wary of undermining the British broadcaster. Let's have a watch of where they stand in terms of the Labour, the left-leaning side, with regard to its bias.
The answer to that, Ben, is yes and no. So, yes, the BBC really does need to get its house in order. This does seem to be an absolute case closed example of editing to make a point. And Panorama needs to hang their head in shame because they have hitherto.
Is Trump's billion-dollar lawsuit against the BBC realistic? Trump's threatening BBC with a billion-dollar lawsuit over an edited video. A leaked memo showed Panorama slice his speech, implying he incited riots. Now he wants a retraction, an apology, and cash. But UK's libel laws are a hurdle. It caps damages and demands proof of serious harm. Plus, the deadline to sue in the UK is actually gone. In Florida, he might have a chance, but the BBC isn't a US-based news organisation, and airing this court could also relieve more about the Capitol riots. This lawsuit seems less about winning and more about making noise. Is this a calculated influence played by Trump's New England legal odds?